Hello and welcome to our very first episode of the LogJam Lounge, which is our podcast here on the LogJam Media Podcasting Network, where if something doesn't fall under our million other podcasts here, we can talk about it and just have fun. This episode, we will be talking Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. A lot later than I wanted to talk about it, but real life stuff happened and I kind of got delayed on that. So excited to have it. My name is Jordan, and with me talking Ghostbusters is Casey McGeorge.
Oh, I'm afraid of no ghosts. How's it going, everybody?
Going good. How are you, Casey? How's everything going in your world? For people that don't know, Casey has podcasted with me numerous times on the Marvel podcast. We started with The Break Room, which was our podcast on Superstore, the TV show, and now we're doing films for the very first time. So he actually just saw Afterlife for the first time a few weeks back.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I'm glad I saw Afterlife. I guess I'll give a little spoiler on that. I hadn't seen it up until recently, till we decided to watch it for that podcast. I was very, very pleasantly surprised for that one, and I was kind of like, man, I really should have watched this before. So before that, before leading into that, I watched the original two Ghostbusters movies just to kind of get back up into the series and realize, man, I really like these movies. I haven't seen them in a while. So uh, then the trailer for this one came out and everything, and I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna have to watch this one now.
Yeah, and I'm very glad you did because I was wanting to talk about this movie. Like I've always wanted to expand our coverage here on the podcast and get you know uh, into more nerd stuff that I haven't been able to share my love for. And really, I don't know that many people that like Ghostbusters like all that much to talk about it. So I was happy, and I'm not creating a whole Ghostbusters podcast for this movie. So it
That'd be
was
like
like,
5 episodes.
yeah,
It'd be like
this is
five
the best
episodes.
time. This is the best time to do it is through this thing we call the Logjam Lounge. Um, so let's dive into it. We're talking Frozen Empire here, which came out just on March 22nd, 2024. It was directed by Gil Keenan, written by Gil Keenan and Jason Reitman, of course, based on Ghostbusters by Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis, and starring Paul Rudd, Carrie Coon, Finn Wolfhard, McKenna Grace, Camille Nanjiani, Patton Oswalt, Celeste O'Connor, Logan Kim, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, Annie Potts, and William Atherton.
All right, so real quick, before we
Yeah.
start, what has that director done before? Because in all fairness, I thought Reitman directed this one. I really didn't pay attention to the credits. And I know he directed Afterlife, right?
Yes, yeah. So this is the same writing. They both wrote Afterlife, um, but he directed it while Reitman did not direct this one. But he's directed Monster House, the 2006 animated film.
I know of the movie. I haven't seen it, but I know the movie you're talking
I
about.
didn't realize it was written by Dan Harmon and two other people. That's interesting. He
Okay,
directed a
wow.
movie called City of Ember, which actually starred uh, Bill Murray in it in 2008. Poltergeist, 2015 supernatural horror film, the remake of the 82 film. A Boy Called Christmas, which was a British Christmas movie in 2021. And this was his latest
Okay.
direction.
Nothing I've ever seen before, but that's okay. Like I said, I
Really,
just
you
was
didn't
under
see
the
I feel like Poltergeist would be up your alley there.
it is. I think it's probably one of those ones I need to get around to watching. But I just never did. Uh, in all fairness, like I said, I just thought since he made the last one, and I know he
Yeah.
wrote it, I figured he Reitman was doing this one as well. But I probably should pay more attention to that.
So it looks like the reason why maybe Reitman didn't direct this one is because he is directing the SNL film, so maybe he was prepping that. But Gil Keenan wrote that as well.
There's an SNL film.
Yeah, SNL 1975, which is coming out. It's like behind, like about the events leading up to the premiere of Saturday Night Live.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, so it looks like because of that movie, he had to maybe drop out of doing Frozen Empire, and that led to Gil Keenan taking over for that. But they both wrote the script
And I'm
for
sure he was
Frozen
still
Empire.
involved in the whole
Yeah,
process.
he's a producer, so I'm sure he knew what was going on it. Okay,
All right.
I guess
So,
let's just get
but
into. Yeah, go ahead.
before we start about the actual movie, the one real bone I had to pick. I haven't seen a movie in the theaters since Multiverse of Madness from Doctor Strange a couple years ago.
That's what I
Right.
thought. Yep.
Um. So okay, it is what it is. I haven't seen anything. There's nothing that's really appealed to me to go to the movie. So as I was telling you, I got the day off, and it was. I don't really go a lot during opening weekend either because I know it's usually crowded. But I found a matinee on opening weekend, and it was an IMAX. So I was like, okay, cool. I'll get a matinee price on IMAX. Nice theater. Like, I'll do that. And I talked to you about this last week before we started recording this. My big bone to pick is what is going on with previews and things before the movie starts. Um, my ticket was for 2 o'clock. Now I know the movie doesn't start right at 2, right? There's previews and all this other stuff. As I told you, I got there maybe at 2:05 after I got my popcorn, hot dog, and everything. The previews didn't end till 2:26, and then we had 2 minutes of the IMAX stuff about where the exits are, and all this other stuff, and then your Nicole Kidman AMC movie theater thing that they show now. 28 minutes from the time my ticket said started until the movie actually got going. So almost 30 minutes. Now, granted, a couple more of those were for IMAX specific previews that were coming up for IMAX things, but still, almost 30 minutes before we start the movie. Like, is this a normal thing going into movies now that I've missed out on? Or am I just an old
What, the
person yelling at
extended
the clouds
previews?
now? Yeah, like almost 30 minutes. Like,
It
am I
really
just the old
depends.
person yelling at clouds now? Like,
Yeah, you're Grandpa Simpson. No, it is very dependent on your theater, I would say. There's some theaters I go to, like the one I went to played 2 trailers. And that's par for the course for them. They'll usually start the previews before showtime even starts, and then you'll only get like a handful of previews, and then the movie is starting not long after showtime, which is great. Um but if I go to like an AMC, which is where I think you said you went, yeah,
yeah.
we're approaching 25, 30 minutes until the movie starts. It's
Am I
egregious.
okay? I was gonna say, am I the only one that's a little perturbed by this? Like, I get it. You got to show previews and you want to get people excited to come back to the theater, especially now after COVID and everything, and they still want to get people coming back to the theater. So you want to get people back in there to show them all these great upcoming movies and stuff they might have missed unless they've really been following things about what's coming out. I get that, like, and that's fine and dandy, but like 30 minutes worth, like, am I the only one that's like it's way too much?
I think that's, and I'll say I think it's mostly AMC because when I go to Cinemark, which is another big
Yeah, that's the
chain,
other
I
big
don't.
one.
Yeah, I don't get that as much. I don't get at like maybe 20 minutes. It's not like I feel like anytime I go to AMC, it's like looking at the watch, like, oh my god, like this is. I'll let you know because I don't know. Like I'm going to see the re-release of Phantom Menace, and it's at AMC, so I'll kind of like try to clock the previews on that next
Yeah,
month and see
especially
how it
since
is.
that's not a new release either. So,
Yeah,
like, are they going to show previews? Are they not going to show any? Are they only going to show a couple because people are there for nostalgia? Like that,
right,
that
right.
might be a good idea. I know we talked about it before. I know the preview for that was attached to Meet Joe Black when it came out.
Yes.
which made Meet Joe Black the #1 movie in the country for its first week because there was a ton of
Crazy.
people that went to go just see the preview for episode 1, and then as soon as they saw the trailer for that, they got up and noped out, but still counted because they bought a ticket for the movie. So um, I don't know. I want to go see maybe the Godzilla versus Kong movie. I might
Me
go see
too.
that before my vacation ends, but I don't know.
Well, if you do, and if I get a chance to go see it, we should cover it on here because I did want to talk Godzilla Kong as well.
You know what? I got the other one in my collection too. I think I need to watch that first.
Oh, okay.
Um, just for me. I mean, I'm not saying you
Yeah,
do,
yeah.
but like I might want to watch that one first just to kind of see what's happened with it that maybe led up to it. I don't know, but yeah, we'll talk about that. That
I
might be
recommend
another
I
one.
recommend the MonsterVerse, like uh if or Monarch verse, whatever you want to call it. But um Apple TV had a good show about it called Monarch Legacy of Monsters. I watched that.
I
Uh
heard the last Godzilla that just won an Academy Award wasn't too bad either.
yeah, yeah, that one is like the Japanese made one. It's not like part of this universe. But yeah, I've heard good things. Godzilla minus one. I want to check
Yeah,
that
I've
out
heard
at
that.
some point.
Especially for Godzilla fans, I've heard that's a really good. A lot of people are enjoying that one. So
But yeah, definitely like I really enjoyed Godzilla Kong in 2020. I watched it on Max when it like was it 2020 or 2021 during COVID. They put it out there and they put it on Max too. And at that point, I wasn't really going to the theater, so it was
yeah,
a stream and watch, and I enjoyed it. And really, we haven't had a movie since then. But we had the Monarch show on Apple TV, which had Kurt Russell and his son playing the same character in different time frames, and that's very cool. They look very similar, so that
okay,
was
yeah, that
very
sounds
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah, so if you have Apple TV, if people have Apple TV Plus, I recommend that. But let's get to back to Ghostbusters here.
Yeah, sorry
um
about that.
that's all right. um okay, so I think we should just kind of start with like we've kind of, I want to tell this to the listeners, we're not going to go plot by plot. Like if you saw the movie, you saw it. If you didn't see the movie, we're going to kind of tell you things that we liked, things we didn't like, but you'll still have the chance to go see the movie and make your own decision if that's what you want.
There might be some spoilers in this,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
we're gonna try not to spoil the entire movie, like
Yeah, not a
if
we're not going to
possible.
do plot by plot where like
Yeah,
you feel like you're watching it with us right now. So so yeah, if you're okay with little slight spoilers, I'm assuming you are if you're listening to this. Um but yeah, so let's kind of start with just the overall premise. We've left Oklahoma, right? We're 3 years later, and now they're all in New York. Uh, the whole extended cast is in New York as well.
yeah. So okay, obviously your main Ghostbusters, Vank and Ernie Hudson's character and Dan
Right.
Aykroyd's character. Obviously,
Hmm.
they live in the New York metropolitan area, so they're gonna be there. I can understand uh, the Spanglers going back to New York because that's where they were before Afterlife started, before they got evicted and had to go there, right? So they went back and I thought it was kind of a reach to get podcast and to get what's her name back in New York City all of a sudden from out of nowhere.
Yeah, lucky. Um, I think this is something I think they made work. They at least gave them excuses. If they had just all moved there, I would have been like, what? But podcast is apparently on an internship or like summer camp, is what
Yeah,
he
it's
told
during the
us.
summer.
Yeah.
He had an internship,
And
and I think
Lucky is in an actual like work or internship, and that makes sense for her because she wanted to get out of Oklahoma and she had an experience with the Ghostbusters, so it's like there's a connection, right? Like at least it wasn't like a character that we never like like if she had never been a Ghostbuster in the last
yeah,
movie and then she showed up in this, I would have been a little bit more thrown off.
and it fit because why can't I think of the character's name? Sweet Jesus. Uh, Ernie Hudson.
Trevor? Oh no,
Ernie Hud-
Ernie Hudson. Oh yeah, Winston. Yeah.
Winston Zedmore, right?
Yes,
So
Zeddemore.
she was involved with how they saved the world in Afterlife, right? And
Yeah.
then we
Hmm.
find out in this that Zedmore has this. He's like this billionaire now, and he's a philanthropist and doling money out to things. And he has some sort of like uh, research facility that he's funding. Some weird, not afterlife. I can't think of the name.
It's like a more official Ghostbuster, right? I mean, like it's like a corporate almost like Ghostbusters where they're doing like experiments. They are doing like they're making new proton packs. Like they're
Yeah,
actually doing a lot of real work on the Ghostbuster side of stuff.
and so seeing that she was involved with everything that happened in afterlife, it does make sense that he would have probably spoke to her and gave her a job to go work in that research facility and start working in those things. Like so that, like I said, that kind of makes sense. Like it, but it's just kind of a stretch that these other two ancillary characters of
Yes, yeah.
her and podcasts happen to end up in New York City all at the same time during the summer. Like it makes sense, but it's still kind of a stretch. Like, we had to find a way to shoehorn them in. We don't want to leave them behind, and I get it, but
Yeah.
not against it. But it was one of those like, we're kind of reaching here, guys. But okay, I'll allow it.
Talking about podcasts, what a growth spurt, huh? He looks so different.
Yo, 3 years, 3 years can change a person. Like
And I think it's actually been more than that because they filmed it before COVID, Afterlife. So you're looking at like because it got pushed because of COVID.
18, 19
Uh,
is probably when they filmed it.
so
So
they wrapped up filming in
19, I'd say probably.
let's see. They finished filming in August of 2019. Oh, October of 2019.
We're still looking at 4 years. So oh
Well,
no,
it's
five,
probably
almost 5 years, 4.5, 5 years,
yeah, because they filmed this one last year, I believe. So
about four
yeah,
years.
it's about 4 years for him.
And it how rough estimate how old is the actor playing podcast?
It doesn't. It looks like he doesn't have a Wikipedia page, so I don't know.
Because if he's still a teenager, you can hit those growth spurts like at
Oh
weird
yeah, I'm
points and
sure
at
he
any
is.
time. You know,
Let me see.
if he's maybe early mid 20s, he's probably about the where he's going to be. But if he's still between like 16 and like 20, he can. Next thing you know, we look at him, he might have grown like 6 inches.
It says he was born in 2007. So what is that?
So right now he's like
17.
16. Yeah.
He's
Oh yeah.
he's
So he can hit a
he's
growth spurt and
17, but he filmed the first one at like age 13. Then
yeah, and then so he was like 16 or something when they started filming this. So yeah,
yeah,
that can
yeah.
yeah,
So that's a
between
big
like
jump.
12, 13, 16, you can over the summer you can sprout up. So you hear that all the time with athletes a lot too. People who are,
Uh huh.
basketball, football players where, they leave sophomore year of high school, they come back their junior year, and now they've grown 7 inches somehow, and everybody's like, what happened? So
Yeah. So he was like so much taller. At first, I was like, oh my god, is that podcast? Like it took me a bit. McKenna Grace looks older too. That's Phoebe. I mean, she
yeah.
obviously has aged 3 years or 4 years. She's 17, so she was about 13 around the as well. She's turning 18 though, so she was probably like 14 when she filmed Afterlife.
She is still by far my favorite character in this whole
Mm-hmm.
second part of the series. Um, just the way that she, like I said before when we talked about Afterlife, the way she captures kind of that Spangler thing, skipping a generation and going from her mom to her.
Yeah.
Um, just how smart she portrays herself, and I think this one was great too because not only is she still carrying on with that, but she's also going through the aspects of she's still older, but she's still a teenager and going through teenager things. She's still going through learning to kind of be herself and having to deal with being a teenager and not necessarily agreeing with your parents. And sometimes you and your
Yeah.
parents don't always agree on stuff and having those attitudinal issues. And
Well, it's very yeah, I was gonna say I really relate it with the parents in this movie because I'm getting older. I guess like when they were telling, like when they bench Phoebe for 3 years, right?
Had to do it.
Yeah, I like when she says like they're all like, "Hey, 3 years, that's nothing. That'll fly by." And she's like, "You guys are saying that because it's like she pretty much calls them old because of like how time is relative, and for her it is going to go slower. For them, it's going to go faster." And I was like, "I agree with your parents because uh 3 years for me flies by so fast now. Like that would be no issue."
It does. I can kind of see her point as well in the aspect of she's the only one that really has a grasp on a lot of things that are going on, right? Uh, Paul Rudd's character knows and loves the Ghostbusters and is a smart individual, but nowhere near as smart as Phoebe is, right? Her mom, I hate to say it, was rather rude to say to her mom, but she was right in the aspect of if her last name wasn't Spangler, she'd have been answering the phone. She wouldn't have been actually working as a Ghostbuster. Once again, rude, not something you need to say to your mom. Um, I probably would have lost a teeth if I'd have said something like that to my mom. But that was also 35 years ago, so it was in the 80s, different time. Not saying you should beat your kids at all. Um,
I think it was funny when they're like, "You better choose your words carefully next," and then it cuts, and they're like, "I didn't even know she knew,
yeah,
like
every
she
time it's
knew
just
those
like,
words."
where did that come from? And I hate to say it, but I agree with her mom as well. Where after the second time, she's like, "No, you're not benched. You're fired. Like you're done."
Right.
Um, and that, like you said, that's something that comes with age and maturity. Of like, yeah, this is when you're a kid, you don't have the responsibilities. You don't have to worry about anything really, right? You just kind of do what you want, and nothing really counts until you're 18, basically. Even if there's a criminal or a juvenile record, it doesn't matter till you turn 18. It gets sealed up
Hmm.
or it just goes away. And then when you're 18, you start fresh. Her parents are the one who have to look after the aspect of restitution or reimbursement or everything else that goes along with it. They're the ones who have to look at the responsibilities of everything they have to do. And that's a heavy burden at times, man. That's a lot.
Yeah. So this movie kind of starts off with this huge action scene, right, where they are catching the ghost, and they get the ghost, and they crash the car, and the mayor, who is now played by William Atherton, who was in he plays Walter Peck. Of course, that is the man from the first film that Venkman says has no dick. Um,
Great seeing him back. He was perfect in that role
yes,
because he had the vendetta against the Ghostbusters, and with them going back to the city, as soon as he can, he's gonna find a way to shut him down. Perfect foil for him.
and I love at the end when like they save the world again, and he's kind of like about to ream them out again, and like you know they kind of put him in the spot of like oh, aren't you happy the Ghostbusters were able to save the day? And because everybody's so excited for the Ghostbusters stuff, he has to be like, yeah,
Yeah,
like
because they're like, yeah, otherwise the city would be under like 3 feet of ice, and
yeah, and he's the mayor, so it's like there's a little bit more stakes for him in this than it was when he was like what he was like the Department of
EPA or something.
yeah, he was EPA or something in New York last time. So
And I think in Ghostbusters 2, or it was one or two where the mayor was like, I'm not going to be the mayor who gets New York sucked down to the seventh layer of hell. Like, there's no coming back from
right,
that.
right,
So, yeah, same thing with this.
not
Like,
winning the next election.
if he's the mayor that gets New York City as a frozen under 3 feet of ice, which is, it's not just going to stay in New York, it's obviously going to spread to other places.
Right,
Like,
right.
you know, yeah, he's got to solve that. So,
Yeah, so he's a good like side antagonist in this franchise, and especially in this movie I thought that worked because he pointed out the real absurdities too, right? Like when he's like, you guys are a family that like he really had no control over these Ghostbusters. He probably doesn't trust these as much as at least the like, yeah, he had his run-ins with the first ones, right? But they were the Ghostbusters, and now you're seeing
Yeah.
just like this mom and pop, like
Literally.
family,
Yeah.
right, version of it, and then you have the one that's doing all of the ghost busting is
Is
15
a
years old,
yeah, as a kid who's hanging out like in a gunner seat at the
gunner seat,
side
yeah.
of a 1980 something station wagon, right?
Hmm.
And, so yeah, like the dangers on all that are ridiculous. Not only
And
that,
then
you don't.
when, and well, I was going to just quickly say, and then when they mention, Paul Rudd's like, oh, and we, no, we don't pay her, right? And they're like, oh, okay, well, now it's child labor that we got
Yeah,
you on.
once again, this is one of those things where if you're a kid, you're like, oh, it sucks. But if you're an adult and you're looking at this stuff, you're like, yeah, man, like what happens if this kid gets hurt? What happens when this kid like destroys a building, right? Or you know, in the process of trying to capture a ghost, shoots somebody's car that causes like a 15 car pileup that kills a bunch of people, right? Like, where is there insurance in this? Where does all this stuff lie? Are they a licensed and bonded, you know, company? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, yeah, that is like, usually, like in the first movie, you're very anti Walter Peck because he's the one bringing the buzzkill to the group. But in this one, I was kind of understanding where he was coming from. And again, I don't know if it's because I'm older or because it's like, hey, I don't know if I want a 15-year-old having a like
Nuclear powered
proton
proton
pack.
pack, yeah, shooting who knows what in a gunner seat out of a station wagon, like.
Right. For a ghost that like can't really do much, right? Like that ghost they were chasing was not like the biggest threat. It was just a ghost they were chasing.
Well, we also don't know what that ghost has done previously, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, like in all fairness, it didn't seem like a threat. But,
It's not the threat at the
Stay
end of
Puft
this
Marshmallow
movie.
Man. Yeah, it's not
Right.
Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Um, let's talk about the actual intro where we find some old secret society in the
Oh,
1900s or whatever.
yes. In the same building, right? Wasn't that the Ghostbusters building in the past?
Yeah, yeah, because as soon as I was looking, I was like, oh, that's the firehouse. Yeah. So I can't even remember the name of it, but it was
They were
kind of
like a gentleman
like a League of
club.
Extraordinary Gentlemen type thing.
Yeah.
Um, so these late 1800s, early 1900s people go exploring and capture stuff and colonize places and everything and
Oh,
stuff like that.
Manhattan Adventurers Society.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
And Garaka froze them to death, but there was somebody there that was able to contain him into the sphere, right?
yeah,
And then that is what gets passed down into these fire masters that Camille Nanjiani's character is going to be related to.
okay. Here's another fault. We didn't know anything about that until they visit Patton Oswalt and you hear about that. Like, you just see what happened where these people are frozen stiff, right? And then kind of cuts to the newer version of the Ghostbusters moving in and going to Manhattan, right? Okay, cool. Modern day. But we didn't know that there was like this lineage of people who have kept, this thing from coming out into the world. And like eventually we're able to piece it together like, oh, okay, this makes sense now, but I don't know, maybe they could have kind of moved some of this stuff around to kind of explain more, maybe put it out there a little more before.
Yeah, I guess it does take a bit, but
Because we just
uh,
get that, and then eventually Ray has his little occult shop, right?
mhm.
Kumail Nanjiani's character comes in selling this orb, which we know nothing about, which people see, you can see in the trailers and everything, right? He comes in selling this orb, and that's it. And then minutes, at some point later, they take it to Patton Oswalt's character, who, great casting in those two. Patton Oswalt, Kumail Nanjiani, both kind of nerdy, geeky dudes. They fit those
Mhm.
roles perfectly, fit within the universe. Like, Patton Oswalt's character especially looks like a dude who lives in the back of a library and is
Yeah.
like deep, like has an occult section back in the library that nobody knows about. Love it. But then we kind of find out from them like, oh, there's these other people, and it's just like, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but
I don't. It worked for me, and I would say for me it felt like classic Ghostbusters because they always do that part where like they will do the catch up, right?
research,
Like, oh
yeah.
yeah, here's the book that says this is what we're dealing with, and they just kind of run with it. So for me, I was kind of like fine with that. Um, it's probably the more clumsy way compared to other films in the Ghostbusters that and how they've introduced that stuff. Um, my biggest complaint with this whole movie is it doesn't feel like it's written by the same people that did Afterlife. Um, like the vibe is just so much different than what we got in Afterlife. And I say that as a person that like I know we'll probably talk about at the end, but I did enjoy this movie. So but I can see why maybe people were kind of put off by it. I think marketing may have been wrong because I'll tell you how many people in my theater that when I was leaving that are probably like 13 to 15 years old, you know, the high schoolers, the middle schooler, whatever. And they're like, that wasn't that scary. And I'm like, oh, it's
Oh yeah,
Ghostbusters. It's
so
not really supposed to be scary though. You know, it's a comedy.
yeah, but now two things.
But the
One,
trailer did kind of do the scared to death and fear and all that.
how many of them actually might have seen not only Afterlife but the original Ghostbusters? So
Yeah, that I don't know, but they were with their parents who I feel like would have known
parents
what Ghostbusters
possibly. So now there might have, and there also might have been a difference between their parents liking what they saw because they were connected to it as compared to somebody new coming into the franchise. Two, I think maybe the writing might have been different because with Afterlife they were trying to maybe resurrect the Ghostbusters brand and pay not only pay homage to Egon, to Harold Ramis, but to also see like if there's any life left in the franchise at all. And now that there is, now they're trying to continue on with it. And not saying that they didn't purposely do as good of a job, but maybe they really had to put a lot more into it and a lot of their best foot forward to try and resurrect this thing from whatever it was from the previous Ghostbusters in 2000, 16 or whatever it was, to salvage it from there. And then now it's like, okay, how do we continue on with it?
Yeah, and you know, I think for me, I'm in the boat that we both said Ghost Afterlife was 5 out of 5, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, boom, great. And while I did want more Ghostbusters after that, and I still do, I want another sequel to this. Afterlife was really like the perfect movie for me with Ghostbusters. That then you do have to pivot though, right? Like so I can see both sides. Like I can see they can't keep doing the slow intro, like the slow version of the theme song and like here's our legacy movie, blah blah blah
Yeah.
that they did for Afterlife because you can do that once. You can do that once before it's like, okay, why are you pulling the same card? So I'm happy that we moved on to a different thing. I'm glad we were back in New York. I'm glad we were back with these characters and it didn't just like cut out the Spanglers. So all of that was good. It's the they were left with like how should I say it? They were left with a mixed bag of how they should approach it. You know, part of them is like, okay, Afterlife did well. It has good reviews or whatever. Let's go ahead and we got to keep the characters we had. But we want to get back to New York. And that's where it kind of leads to Podcast and Lucky having to come with them too cuz they're like this is what people liked about the movie was the characters in the Oklahoma, but we have to bring them to New York and it kind of left them with I think where this movie feels totally different than Afterlife. It, and like it should. So I don't even know what I'm saying, but I can't really pinpoint what I'm trying to say, I guess. But I understand that they had to move on to a different theme, and I'm glad they did. But it still felt like some of the character work wasn't as strong in this movie as it was in Afterlife, I guess is my main point. And for me, my biggest issue with the movie is Melody the ghost. Um, I think they have a great meeting in the park with the chess. It really is a nice allusion to Afterlife when it was Spangler, Egon, playing chess with her. But this might sound terrible. I didn't really care about Melody that much. I didn't really care if she was going to get to the other side. I felt like we didn't get that much time with her. I also felt like the effects for her ghost weren't great. And uh, the fact that they were like becoming friends that fast, and maybe a little bit more than friends, was like really shocking how quick that was progressing to the point of her feeling really betrayed and her feeling like really sorry she would have to betray her. So like that kind of stuff is what didn't work for me. But like the Phoebe like needing to have a friend outside of the family, Phoebe getting locked out of being a Ghostbuster, all of that was very interesting to Phoebe's character. But ultimately, just Melody didn't really work for me. I didn't really care much about like her ghost at all.
I, I hate to say it, but I think I wish they would have expanded on Phoebe and the ghost more. Because like you said, it seemed like there might have been more than just a friendship brewing there. Now, I don't know if they just wanted to hint at that and let the audience use their imagination, go with it on
I
their
think
own.
they were very scared to pull that. Is I don't know why, but I felt like they wanted to be like
I know
there was
why.
undertones of it. Yeah, there was undertones of it, and
If
they
they
just
would have
didn't
went the
do it.
way we're talking about, it definitely would have drummed up enough of, oh, see, it's a woke thing, and now they have to make everybody either gay, or everybody has to be black, or everybody has to be whatever. So they probably wanted to skirt along those lines. I kind of had the same thought of like, I think this is more than a friendship, but what are like, I don't know. Like, what do I know? I could just be reading that completely wrong. But even from some of the reviews I saw afterwards, like a lot of people were like, Was there more there? Like, why did they not? I don't know. Um, so I didn't mind so much I didn't mind necessarily so much what was going on with the additional ghosts there. Um, some of it I think was kind of once they started to pull that thread and you saw where she was going, a lot of other stuff kind of started to make more sense of like, oh, okay, here's like, there's a couple of things I kind of was like, okay, this is what's going to happen. And then there was one thing towards the end where I was like, oh, okay, that's what that's going to be used for. So, like, I see why she carries that around, and see where that's going to come into play. So I kind of get that. Um, you said you want to see more in this series. Did you see what the production name of it or whatever was, or like it came up like a Ghost Core production or something like that? Sony had some other.
Oh yes, yeah. It's called Ghost Core. The people. What is this? Ghost Core. Yeah. It is a co-production company that was founded in 2015. Um, and it has Jason Reitman and Dan Aykroyd are like two of the key people. It says, and
So
they've made 3 movies: Ghostbusters 2016, Afterlife, and Frozen Empire.
so one thing I saw afterwards that there's a possible like, from here they're open to wherever the franchise decides to go, right? Whether it's another
Mm-hmm.
direct sequel or another thing that they can do is because you had Zedmore's company that was focusing this paranormal investigations with that British character that they had or whatever. Um, that what's her name was working with. That's how she ended up in New York. You can kind of maybe branch out with them and have maybe a side, uh, a spinoff kind of focusing on that instead of necessarily going down to.
I'll sign up for that because let me tell you, James Acaster is one of my favorite parts of this movie. Um, he, if people don't know who he is, look up his Netflix comedy specials. He's a British comedian. He is absolutely hilarious. I love James Acaster so much that when I saw him in trailers, I was like, hell yeah. And then I saw him in this movie and I was worried he was going to die because of like that. In the trailer, you see his hand get frozen when he grabs the orb thing, and I was like, "Oh, they're just gonna kill him off." But he survives, and I was happy that James Acaster was in this movie. So I would
I,
sign up for a project with him.
I haven't seen anything with him, but I definitely wouldn't mind seeing more of him. I thought he was a good addition. I loved his role that he had in this. But yeah, I could see maybe a spin-off and see where that goes of whatever, because it doesn't necessarily have to be with Ghostbusters. Now you've got their paranormal investigations that they were doing or whatever, and capturing all these other
The
things.
Spin Doctor CD that was possessed.
Yeah, but at the same time, you've introduced Kumail Nanjiani's character. He can still be part of this in some way. Patton Oswalt's character that worked in the library, right? Where maybe they don't, Zedmore and them don't necessarily have access to history and these paranormal books, but Patton Oswalt's character does in the library and underneath the library and back in other places. So spinoffs could work possibly if they didn't want to go with a direct sequel. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would sign up for if they want to do a TV show, whatever. I just worry that I mean, the box office for this movie started out well that first weekend. It's kind of fallen off since then. It had like a huge drop from the first weekend to the second weekend, and
Doesn't
that's
help that
worrying.
Godzilla versus Kong was like the very next weekend either.
Yeah, and that movie's killing it in the box office right now. So a little sad for Ghostbusters, but look, even if the franchise died right here, okay, I think I'm very happy we got Afterlife and Frozen Empire to kind of continue the franchise for a little bit and see some of these characters appear again. Um, like seeing Dan Aykroyd, who is doing this YouTube show, right, with Logan Kim's with podcasts smacking the stuff that's like not
Yeah,
actually possessed and stuff like that was all very good for seeing like Ray in today's world.
he's still
They
running
have
his occult shop or whatever,
yes,
buying
they
these
have
weird various things.
Venkman's a part of stuff like he was the guy who's doing the like psychological study on Camille Nanjiani's character. And then we had Zeddemore who's financing everything and all of that stuff with these old characters worked really well for me. Annie Potts showing back up in uniform.
You know what I'm
Um
gonna say? There's
yeah,
only one thing missing.
Rick Moranis.
I I waited until all the credits were done because I'm like, maybe if they can
Yeah.
just give me like 5 minutes of Tully to just to see him in some way or whatever. But I guess not. I guess I was just asking for too much.
Yeah, I just think he I guess doesn't want to come back.
And he has every right to like
Yeah, yeah.
if that's his decision and his choice that he didn't want anything to do with it for whatever reason that is. Like I respect that decision. But it just would have been nice to see him one more time in that world. We got to see Dana in Afterlife one more time. I don't know if she's still with Vankman. Maybe they're just still in each other's lives. Maybe they were together. Never really said.
I
Kind of
think it
hinted
was
that they were together, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think what I would assume here is that she's off doing her own thing while he was at work, right? Like he's
Yeah,
doing some work here, and then of course he comes in to help save the day at the end, which was great. I say one of the biggest strengths is, while I didn't really care for Melody that much, the story of her match came back around at a perfect time with then the fire master. Like all of that stuff
yeah,
worked
that's
for
what I was
me.
saying.
Like
Like
how they were
I
able
kind
to
of saw
wrap
that one
that
coming.
stuff up was great. Um, and the call back to the keymaster, right? Like when the bad guy goes into the fire master vape shop and he's like, "Are you the fire master?" is very reminiscent of "Are you the key master?" But then he kills him, right? Like this guy's like, "Yeah, I'm the fire master." So that was good. We got to see Slimer again, huh?
Yeah, yeah. Just was it just me? Or did Finn Wolf Hard Wolf Castle, whatever his name is? I'm sorry,
Wolfhard.
Wolf Hard. Did he not have as much of a role in this one as?
And that's my biggest like that's part of that biggest complaint for me is how different it feels. It's like some characters got really sidelined, right? Like I felt like he got sidelined. We barely saw Lucky and we barely saw Podcast. It was really a Phoebe Gary story, I think, right? Like we don't even get that much of the mom as much as Afterlife, I think. Like it's really Paul Rudd centered, I feel.
You know what? You know what I think the story is more about than anything else. Trying to blend a family.
Yeah. Oh, I was so
Um,
happy when she called him dad at the end.
because you know, Paul, even though Paul Rudd is ageless, right? I think it'd be great if we find out if they did a sequel, we find out Paul Rudd's character is like 600 years old or something. It'd be awesome because he never seems age. Or even if they just made a joke about it, like where they go in like the museum and they see like a painting of him, you know. But okay, he's trying to blend in with this family, and I imagine yeah, it's difficult. Both of these kids are teenagers, right? Um, but how do you fit in? You can fit into their mom's life very easily, right? But you still have to kind of fit in and find your way into this family and the kids' lives. And I can't imagine that's an easy thing, you know? And he kind of goes into that in this movie where it's like, I don't know where the line is. I don't want to overstep my bounds. And it's, kind of a touchy thing where, at some point, eventually he does have to step in and like, hey, you can't talk to your mom like that. And then Phoebe kind of reminds him like you're not really in his family, which kind of hurts and sucks. But angsty teenager, I get it. Like you're bound to say some shitty things like that to someone who's trying to be a stepdad, but you know. But yeah, trying to blend yourself into that family is not an easy thing, I can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, this is like 3 years without them having like that type of conversation, right? Like, he, he doesn't really know what to call himself for them, and he said like at one point when he's like, "No, I'm her step teacher," that like is just so funny, like such a funny line by Paul Rudd. And the line from the trailer too is so good. The when he starts saying the lines from the theme song, like Paul Rudd kills it again in this.
Okay, not only did they use archival footage from the original Ghostbusters and I think Ghostbusters 2,
Yeah, with
they
the
got
Statue of Liberty.
they got footage. They dug up archival footage of the Ghostbusters toys commercial and everything.
Yes, my mom loved that. She like gasped when they showed that, and they even do the music video. Like you see Ray Parker
Yeah,
and them
they
like dancing in the street too. Yeah.
they dug up that. Like I said, there's the kids with their fake proton packs that they had that they were using as toys in the 80s. Like I wanted one of those so bad. I really did. Never got one. Still mad about that. But like they definitely dug up more than nostalgia factor. That's great. Uh I wonder if that Vigo painting's still around. But anyway, um yeah, so I think it did a lot of things right. I think it was a good continuation of the series and the characters. I would like to see another one. I'm afraid if there is another one though, like the law of diminishing returns is going to hit again, and it's probably going to be even less, unless they can line up the release where it's not really around a bunch of other stuff. You know what I'm saying? They might find themselves in a
Hmm.
situation of, make another one, and then it kind of kills the franchise for good again for another 10 or 15 years, so someone else decides to bring another one.
What if they had tried to do like a Ghostbusters International?
I don't know about that. Now,
Like
I'll be honest.
maybe you grab like James A. Caster, and then you have like Paul Rudd or
Zedmore.
Phoebe, and then you have people from like other Zetamore people across the globe or something. And it's
So,
not in New York; it's in London or something.
so I'm not gonna lie. I thought about that at certain points before because I'm like, this can't be the only place in the world with ghosts. New York City can't be the only place, right?
Yeah.
And what do we hear about a lot? These old Victorian ghosts in like Paris and London and all
Mm-hmm.
these old, especially older European towns and things, right? So yeah, if any place is going to be haunted, it's going to be places in Europe where their history goes, like they have castles that go back like thousands of years. So I thought about it, but then I thought about what happened with like Men in Black International, where it just kind of didn't necessarily pan out. Now I don't know if that's just because the movie was bad, or because it had different people in it, or if because people just weren't up for the whole Men in Black thing anymore. Um, it could be interesting. I mean, I wouldn't be against it, but I just don't know how well it would work. What about you?
I think that might be something that would need would be kind of the kick in the butt um that they might need in the franchise if you can take a couple from this movie and then add in a new cast again and put them in a different city. Because again, if you try to do New York again, I'm kind of wondering like what. And then you got your like one time to do Oklahoma. Like they're not going back to Oklahoma to do anything. So I think
You're,
it might need that type of freshness where it's like, okay, Zetamore has expanded Ghostbusters internationally. Now we have a older Phoebe. We have James A. Caster's character. We have uh a French person, the
okay,
I don't know, like they have a whole bunch of different people.
two things. One, what if instead of a movie they turn that into a series, 6, 8
Oh, I would do
episodes?
that too. Yeah.
Um, two, there was a point in the movie where they were talking to Ray, and Ray was talking about. They asked Ray, "Did you ever wonder if what life would be like to be a ghost?" And he
Mm-hmm.
kind of had that look in his face and his eyes. Do you ever think if they continue on, they expound on that, and at some point we end up with like Ray as a ghost or Ray in that world in some way, shape, or form? I don't think that
Um,
was accidental. I think that might have been like a tease for something.
I don't know. I don't know if I would want that, but I do think if we're going to have another future here, we can't keep relying on Aykroyd and Bill Murray and Ernie Hudson. I think you could have Hudson be like the figurehead still if you need him to, and be like, "Oh, look, I'm the one running the show here." But I don't think we can wait for them to be like. I don't think they'll keep suiting up. They're getting so much up there at this point. It's like, unfortunately, we're going to lose one of them again. It's if you want this thing to stay alive, you have to kind of bank on the young people we had, and maybe try to expand that cast with some different characters.
But that might be a perfect way to write at least Ray out, or to write at least Dan Aykroyd out. Of at some point something happens and he ends up,
Yeah.
even though they
I
kind of
really
already
think
did
that was
that with
just a
Egon.
question. I think that's really just a question because of I feel like he is the one that would uh, believe in it the most, in the sense of like he would have been the one to think about it the most. I think like what he would have been, uh, what it'd be like to be a ghost. I think Venkman wouldn't give a good answer to that or wouldn't really entertain that.
What
Um,
else? Anything else really you want to talk about with this? Or
uh, I'm just looking over everything I have here just to make sure. But no, I think we pretty much covered most of the stuff that really stood out to me in the movie. So I guess we can wrap it up here. But please give me more. Give me more Ghostbusters some way somehow. You asked me Sunday when we were recording the other show what I thought of this. We don't have to do ratings on here, but I did give this a 3.5 out of 5. So if you look at Afterlife being a 5, in my opinion, this was a step down, but I still enjoyed it. Like I wasn't watching the movie like, God damn, this thing sucks or anything. I
yeah,
was, 3.5 is well, 3 out of 5 is even more than 50%. So like 3.5 is pretty good.
I had it at a
Um,
4. Um,
yeah, that's what I was kind of between like 3.5 or 4 is kind of where I was leaning.
I enjoyed it. Now, I will say it could be once again a lot of nostalgia factor, since I really have recently rediscovered my love for the Ghostbusters franchise, and Afterlife I thought was fantastic. And I did see it really close to all. I saw all of these really close together, right? Um, but I'd definitely be up for more. Like I said, I think the addition of a couple of characters were great. Seeing Peck as the mayor of New York City now, I think was a great addition. Um, I just, I'm definitely interested to see where it goes from here. Do they call it quits? Do we get like a streaming series? Do we get another movie and then that's it? Um, what happens from here?
That's a big question. And box office wise, you would think. Let me see. Let me double check what Afterlife made. So Afterlife made $204 million on a $75 million budget. This has made 138 so far out of a $100 million budget. So it's only another 15 million to make this one, and it's made like 70 million less right now, but it's still only like 2 or 3 weeks in. So that might still go up, but it's not going to break even at the pace of it right now. It seems like. So who knows if they're going to be like they might bench it a little bit, and then you get like another legacy sequel in 10 years where they're like, we got McKenna Grace now as a
Yeah,
25-year-old, you know, like,
yeah.
and they bring back that cast or something.
It'll be
But who
interesting to
knows?
see what they do with the DVD release too. See how well that is, because this might be one. This
Yes,
might
because
be
that
one of those where it picks up really on a home release, and then people are like, oh wow,
Yeah, and this movie is probably going to end up on Disney Plus because Sony made a deal with Disney from like their 2022 to 2026 movies are going to go on Disney Plus. So at some point, this is going to pop up on there. People are going to watch it, right? And if it does well on there, Sony might be like, all right, it's time to make another one. We're getting good feedback from it because like Sony never got into the streaming game, so they're still just selling their stuff and they're making money off of it that way. So they will have DVD release, Blu-ray release, and streaming release that could affect how profitable this movie is. Enough where they say, let's make another one. Maybe scale it back to 75 mil or 80 mil and not
yeah.
go. The thing was, 100 million is reasonable for this movie. A lot of movies nowadays are 150, 200, 250. They made these two movies pretty cheap.
I was gonna say, remember when $100 million movie was like ridiculous? They spent
Yeah,
$100 million
yeah.
making this movie. Now, like, if you can get something like 50 million or under for a big blockbuster, it's like, wow.
The fact is, they made Afterlife and Frozen Empire for 175 million combined, and that's less than some movies. Like that's less than what Apple paid for Argyle. Like that's the mind numbing thing about. So Sony might say, yeah, We'll pump out another one at 100, maybe 110, because we'll have to give cast increases, and we'll make up some profitability from merchandise, physical release. If it's really good, it's going to hit theaters good, and streaming. Like, that at that point they might say, "Yeah, let's do one more. See how it goes." But yeah, that wraps us up. I guess that this is our first episode of Logjam Lounge. So if you want to know what we might be covering on here throughout the future, um, we have a few hosts that will. Well, for me, I'm probably not going to be doing much of anything because of the baby coming soon. But when it comes to, my friends Ron and Chris, they are going to be taking over some of these podcasts that I do. So they might cover like, my plan was to cover House of the Dragon season 2, which is a month before the babies do. So I could cover a few episodes maybe, and we'll see how it plays out. See how busy and how much time I actually have for this stuff. Um, but anyway, if we don't have a lot of time, like if I don't get to cover a lot of stuff like this, I'm happy to have covered this. And hopefully at some point, whether it's seeing in theaters or seeing on streaming, we can talk Godzilla versus Kong, or not. It's not even versus Kong. Godzilla, Kong, New Empire, and talk a little bit about that movie. But thank you for coming on, Casey, and talking some Ghostbusters Frozen Empire.
Not a problem. And actually, I think I got to watch Kong Skull Island first too.
Oh, that one's really good. I do own that one because I did really enjoy Kong Skull Island. So I say give it a whirl.
Like honestly, if I'm gonna do all that, I kind of there's some steps I missed out in between, so I might have to see which ones I missed as far as what's happened. I know I think I own, but haven't seen Skull Island, and then Godzilla versus Kong, and then so it'd probably be just like Ghostbusters. Like, all right, let me go back to the beginning again. I
Yeah,
don't know if we're
yeah.
gonna go back to the Jack Black King Kong. That was a while
No,
ago.
you don't have to. You don't have
Um,
to.
but I might have to do Skull Island at least and then go from there.
Skull Island's good. Tom Hiddleston, John Goodman. What's funny is a lot of those movies, or at least the first few of those, were cast by Sarah Haley Finn, who cast the MCU. And the first Godzilla film with Bryan Cranston and has what's her name in it? Who plays Wanda? Elizabeth Olsen.
Elizabeth Olsen,
Yeah, and it also has the guy who played Quicksilver,
Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Aaron Taylor Johnson. But instead of playing brother and sister, they're playing husband and wife in that movie, which I think is interesting. It was a year before Age of Ultron came out so they were like filming those pretty back to back, I guess. And then Tom Hiddleston is in Kong Skull Island, and
There's rumors that that's your next James Bond right there.
yeah, they
Eric,
came out and said he hasn't been cast, so we'll see. But rumors were flying.
and like I don't follow a lot of this stuff very deeply, right? Like I just kind of pick up on whatever the Google feeds kind of shove my way every now and then.
Right.
So I might miss a lot of it, but a lot of times when stuff like that happens, those castings when they come out, a lot of times they're on. Now sometimes it could just be maybe these. I think some of these places might be putting out possible castings to see what the reaction is going to be before they ultimately decide. Like, oh, leak so and so is going to be the next James Bond, and then depending on how they go, that might be enough for them to be like, okay, we'll go with it, or let's keep looking. I don't know, but I imagine if we end up with him as the next James Bond, and then Elizabeth Olsen, I could see playing a Bond girl down the road.
That'd be interesting. Get them in another movie together.
Well, I mean, the Bond girl thing is pretty highly sought after. Like, it's not necessarily like, I mean, you've had Holly Berry, you had Denise Richards do it. Anna de Armas has been a Bond girl, so I mean,
Yeah, she was just one of them.
so I mean that's one of those like another one of those like when there's a Bond girl going up, those aren't those are pretty prestigious roles to get now. So
Yeah. All right. Well, that'll wrap us up here. If you want more of Casey and myself, films for the very first time, you can find that If you're watching us on our channel here, there is a link to that channel, Films for Their Very First Time, that you can follow. And it's a podcast where we each pick a movie that one of us has not seen, and we alternate each week. And it can be a TV show, it can be another event at times. And this upcoming episode that's coming up is Field of Dreams. Casey's never seen it, so that will be dropping on Friday of this week. So make sure you check that out. And yeah. So thank you all for watching and listening along with us. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll catch you next time here on the Logjam Lounge.